What's good, people? Izzy Max here, back again for another pregame episode. This is week 2 of season 4, and as always, I'm joined by Dan. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to another fun week of matchups.
Yeah, last week was definitely interesting. Before we get started, the Google form to join the server is in the description, as well as the Twitter for the league. So you guys can follow that or join the server or do both. That'd be great. But without further ado, something we didn't do last week, we get to start with transactions. And the first transaction here is Hector dropping Togedemaru for the Gmax Pikachu. At first glance, it's not a huge deal. You know, Togedemaru and Pikachu kind of do the same thing. They're around the same speed stat. Togedemaru does get that steel type with sturdy, though, so it doesn't always have to be a lightning rod user. But Pikachu offers him a third follow me user. So I just think it's interesting. It does kind of unlock things for Blastoise and the Togekiss, because now they can both be ran, and you can do different setups depending, or hell, all three can run follow me and just support the massive threat that is Darmanitan. But what do you think of this one? It was kind of a meme from me, but looking at it, I kind of like it.
Yeah, I can see arguments in both directions. I think offensive Pikachu has more potential than offensive Togedemaru, and having a third follow me user lets you get that mythical double follow me turn more frequently, if that's something you want to do just to flex on your opponent. I do also think Pikachu has slightly better support tools than Togedemaru, because I think it's got basically the exact same kit as a Raichu. But I do think if you're not maxing the Pikachu and you're just running a Focus Sash set, then Togedemaru is usually going to be better in that support role, because it is going to have a little bit more damage output. It's going to be a little bit threatening, and Spiky Shield does so much more than Protect that it really messes up a lot of flowcharts. So I'd say this is a pretty lateral move. I think it's got potential to be an improvement and potential to be a downgrade. I think Pikachu is a lot more boom busty than Togedemaru, so I don't hate it, but I don't love it.
I just think it's funny. But you can have the next one.
Yeah, so Jess is dropping Vaporeon for Dragalge. This is a shift basically from a support option to another offensive option. I think it's pretty good on her team. It gives her something that functions very well in Trick Room with that double stab bonus instead of the 1.5 times stab bonus. Dragalge hits like a tank, especially in max. Its 2 max moves I really like that are stab, the Wormwind to lower attack, and then the poison move, which will raise its own special attack. So I'm usually a big Dragalge fan, and though I think Vaporeon support is really nice, I like this move for her team. But what do you think?
Yeah, this is just kind of a domino of moves that she's going to make. When she first originally drafted, she honestly just forgot about Dragalge. So we'll see what happens in the weeks to come. But the next one is Poliwrath for Wishy-Washy. This is just one of those, again, kind of lateral moves like Hector, you know, dropping a water for a water. You're not really needing that fighting stab, and Swift Swim isn't really going to come up too terribly often on Gumi's squad. And his Trick Room options were kind of weird. None of them, I think, were at base 30. They're all a little bit quicker. I don't have the teams in front of me, so I can't. But I know he's got. I think
Delmise is his main Trick Room sweeper, which is base 40.
He's got like Vikavolt and Runerigus, I think.
Right. Runerigus is base 30, but it's not exactly a sweeper.
And then Avalugg under that, but this gives you a special option. Again, I just kind of think this is a lateral move, not too big, not detrimental, just lateral. I like it. I'm excited to see Wishy-Washy because I have zero faith in it. But hey, what do you think about this one?
I have more faith in Wishy-Washy than you, but I'm not sure if it's something that was expressly needed on his team. I think it's got, again, a lot of potential to perform well. And, you know, you can't really argue with those base stats. If you can help protect it to some extent, I think it's going to be I think this is going to be a trade where the wishy-washy is going to come more frequently than the Polyrath would, even though it doesn't seem to offer his team too much in terms of individual mon upgrades.
Yeah, I agree. Why don't you hit the next one? We got Dina.
Yeah, so Dina's trade I absolutely love. The War Turtle for the Butterfree, it gives her a ground switch in, which she did not have before this. So I immediately love it. I know she's giving up War Turtle all the support that War Turtle has, especially the Follow Me being downgraded into a Rage Powder, but I just think the defensive typing for the Butterfree, along with just some random sleep abilities here and there, other little bits of random utility that I can have, in a vacuum, it's probably not as good as War Turtle, but on this team, I think it's better.
Yeah, I think I might have sniped Tangela, and I know in the Why Didn't These Get Drafted video, I said, hey, Tangela really needs to be on her team. And then you'll see later, I started looking at mine and said, yeah. So, yeah, Butterfree on her squad is a pure upgrade. I know where she was going with War Turtle, but I do like Butterfree a little bit more. Here for Toxic, dropping the Poltegeist for Slowking Galar. This is not the move I thought he was going to make, but nevertheless, all the slow guys are super, super good. Poltegeist not probably doing anything on his squad, just based on how he has it constructed, and I can see Slowking being used in that slower Psy spam mode, but I am kind of surprised this wasn't one of the regular slow boys. So what do you think about this one?
I like Slowking Galar a lot. I've used it before in the off-season MBC League. I think it's a good size spam Trick Room option. And I do like that he's now adding another Trick Room setter that isn't just Necrozma on his team. So I think it's giving him more viable modes. So I actually like I like this transaction for his team.
Yeah, the second Trick Room setter is huge. Why don't you cover the next one?
Yeah. So Anthony dropped Scolipede for Mr. Rhyme. Scolipede's a weird Pokemon. It's got speed boost, it's got some boosting moves, it can deal a decent amount of damage, but Mr. Rhyme has just been one of those Pokemon that's overperformed in every league that I've ever seen it in. Its move pool is much better than you think it is. Its stats don't look great, but they do just enough in everything for it to be a really nice glue piece with fake out options, some decent attacking options, some good support options. So I like this move because Anthony's team has a lot of threatening offensive modes, and I don't think Scolipede supported them nearly as well as Mr. Rhyme did.
Yeah, and this Mon's not quad weak to a typing and another Trick Room setter, because currently I think his only Trick Room setter was the Deancey. But yeah, I like this one. Mr. Rhyme, like you said, does always overperform. For me, we kind of already touched on it. I'm dropping Serena for Tangela. I have a lot of physical offense, a lot of really good physical offense. And looking at my future matches, Serena's offense just really isn't needed. And I do think Tangela does offer a little bit more support. Since I do have a Follow Me user in Electivire, it does feel kind of weird putting that next to things that are weak to ground, like my Melmetal. So I just figured Tangela, probably the better option. It does have a respectable special stat, and if built correctly, it will never die. That thing is very much so super bulky. But what do you think about this one?
I mean, I used Tangela all last season, and I also used it in a VBA season that I competed in, so I know that it is really good at what it does, and I think it'll work on your team. But I am sad to see Serena get dropped from one of the league's biggest Serena stands.
Yeah.
It's a quality Pokemon with a unique ability that can help shut down random nonsense from your opponents, but Tangela probably helps your team a little bit more, so it's a slight upgrade, but emotionally it's a downgrade.
Yeah, and those random shenanigans aren't really in my division, but anyway, why don't you go ahead and talk about Charles?
So Charles made the most interesting transaction, I think, dropping Audino for Togepi, because they are seemingly unrelated in their roles. They're both pretty slow, but Togepi is much slower and operates better Trick Room while also having Follow Me, where Audino is the Trick Room setter with a different set with a different support kit. It's probably a slight upgrade because the Togepi can really help protect the quad weak mons that he's got up top. Specifically, I'm thinking of the Genesect that he does need a little bit more protection for, but Audino is just such a solid Pokemon as well that I can't really say this is an upgrade, but more of a lateral move that it's going to make his flow charting easier, but I think it's going to reduce some of his long-term viability for late game options.
Yeah, Audino, tell me if I'm wrong, I think is his only Trick Room setter currently.
I don't remember him having another one, but I'm not looking at his team sheet currently.
Okay, Togepi does get After You. And it is incredibly slow, so that does kind of help with his Trick Room matchup, so I can see it. And the Follow Me, like you said, is very, very good. Dark here, dropping the Shedinja for the Squirtle. He actually was messaging me about this when I recommended this to him. Shedinja has the same weaknesses as Victini, and Shedinja is Victini's proc, so I said, hey, why don't you just grab Squirtle? You know, it gets Aqua Jet, Fake Out, Follow Me, Icy Wind, all these things that are actually usable, and you don't have to actually use a Shedinja. So he pulled the trigger on it. I think this fits his squad very, very well. Like I said, it is a proc. It is now Follow Me, and he does have Rage Powder in the Fungus, which is always a good combo to have. And Squirtle, surprisingly, can be decently bulky. So it doesn't always have to be ran with a Focus Sash, but 9 times out of 10 it will. But I just think this is a pure upgrade.
Great transaction. Squirtle's support set is very similar to Blastoise, and I think support Blastoise is always criminally underrated. Good value there, and it's got the Follow Me. You can't hate it.
No, not at all. Rounding it out, you get John and I'll get Burst.
Okay, I'm very sad. Obstagoon got dropped. Obstagoon is such a cool Pokemon. I mean, it got dropped for just a strictly better Pokemon, but it doesn't mean that I'm not sad about it. Also, he has Marshadow, which means Obstagoon's typing might have been slightly better on his team, but just the Intimidate, the Wide Guard potential, coaching potential, great offenses. Like, Hitmontop is just a better Pokemon than Obstagoon, but that doesn't mean he's still not, like, very disappointing.
Yeah, I was hoping to see Obstagoon do some work, but because I have faith in it, but it's waning by the season. So, lastly, probably our biggest move, I think our only tier 1 change. Burst is dropping an Ice weakness for an Ice type in the Rillaboom for Glastrier. This helps his team so much. Like I said in previous videos, his Trick Room mode, as high as some people are on Copperajah, wasn't great. And you have to set up Snorlax for it to actually do anything. And Glastrier can just come out and start going. It doesn't even necessarily have to be in Trick Room because it is just so hard to kill. I love this trade. I think it's very much so an upgrade. What do you think, Mr. Glastrier?
Yes, as the person in the league who's used Glastrier the most, this is a great trade for him. I'm very curious to see the sets that he runs with it, because there is a wrong way to run Glastrier, and I'm really hopeful that Burst will not do that. But this thing just comes out with 145 attack that boosts itself every time it kills something, 130, I believe, defense, and 110 special defense. Like, I don't know. It's just a nuts Pokemon, unbalanced. Game Freak just wanted to give you an Ice type that did something, and my puppy is trying to hit my keyboard, so I apologize about that. But Glastrier is awesome, and it's also not weak to Ice, so pure upgrade on Burst team.
Yep, so moving on, we now have our matchups. The first one is going to be Anthony versus Hector. You'll see the matchup here. We got Dragapult, Venusaur, Barraskewda, Colossal, Ninetales, Riolu, Meowstic, Deancey, Scizor, Mr. Rhyme, and Greedent. And for Hector, we have Blastoise, Togekiss, Darmanitan G, Regirock, Comfey, Crocodile, Togedemaru, Frostlass, Talonflame, Appleton, and Sandaconda. Before we start, I will preface this by we literally just glanced at these matchups and picked them on. Seeing how useful and completely obliterative the Darmanitan was, I picked it because if it's not broke, don't fix it, and I do think it does kind of have a good matchup into a lot of what Anthony wants to do. And with Hector having all the redirection, I picked Ninetales for Anthony in kind of the only way to hit it with a good spread move. You do have Diamond Storm from the Deancey, which was going to be a close second for me. But if you're able to fire off a Heat Wave and just kind of chunk it for some sizable damage, maybe even set up a Colossal somehow, I think it is going to be doing a lot of work. But why don't you tell me about what you picked?
Yeah, so from Hector's side, first of all, I've never seen that form of Darmanitan before in my life. That's the irrelevant form. So very interesting artistic choices, but we all know Darmanitan is a snowman. But I think the Togekiss next to either the Darmanitan or even next to a Follow Me Blastoise is going to be very threatening, because if it's next to Darmanitan, you don't know if it's Follow Me or that setup Darmanitan, or if the Darmanitan is just going to be a Scarf Gorilla Tactics variant that's going to nuke something, and then you have this offensive Crit Kiss. So that's what I was thinking, is that this offensive Kiss looks really good into his team, and if he does want to run the Darmanitan, the Togekiss is going to be the better redirector than the Blastoise, because Blastoise doesn't like Venusaur stuff. On Anthony's side, I do think that this Scizor, being a Steel type with access to priority, looks pretty good into a lot of the things that Hector wants to do. It's not going to get a lot of Okos, but it's going to get some decent damage. It's going to be able to take some hits. It's not going to work against Babiri Togekiss, but if it's an offensive Togekiss, it's going to hit it pretty hard. So I just think that Scizor is going to be one of those pivot pieces that's going to work pretty well this week, and that's why I selected it.
Sorry, I was muted. But yeah, that's going to be our first game of the week that we're going to cover. The second one here is going to be Ryan and Raz. Why don't you take this one?
Yeah, so looking at the teams here, we've got two big Steel types with a lot of Pokemon to support them, and then secondary offensive modes. I just picked the big Steel types, and Celesteela and Metagross as the most important ones. Raz doesn't have a great way to hit Celesteela, and that's a terrifying thing to say when you're looking at a Celesteela team. Like, I've been on a team where I have an Arcanine, which, you know, if you banned it with Flare Blitz, it can hit Celesteela. But that didn't feel great as my best option to hit it. Raz doesn't have that. He's got Electabuzz or Torracat. So I think his best game plan is going to be, let's try to bulk out this Metagross and just survive and see if I can beat it in the late game. So that's why I selected Metagross. And for Ryan, Raz doesn't have anything that hits your Celesteela, so just do Celesteela things. I think it's a pretty straightforward matchup with big Steel types.
Yeah, I mean, I picked Persian and Torracat, not so much for what they are, but what they represent in the supports. If either of these teams are able to get their support mons actually rolling, you know, you got Grimmsnarl, you got Torracat, and Electabuzz, and the Tornadus. Sorry, can't forget Tornadus. Raz can put himself in a good spot because he's going to be in an uphill battle fighting this Celesteela. But on Ryan's side, his support options aren't any slouch either. You know, you got the Raichu, the Persian, Coffer Grigus, Mr. Mime. These support mons, they don't have to do as much work because Ryan does have answers to Metagross. But if Raz is going for maybe like a Keldeo option or Marowak, Ryan's support options are gonna have to help him pivot pretty hard because you do have to prep so hard for these Steel types. So I didn't pick the mons. I kind of picked the options for the supports, but yeah,
Foul Play looks good this week.
Yeah. But we'll go ahead and move on. We got it's just you, okay. So you get back to back. Here you go.
Yeah, so you've got your matchup against Goomy this week. Goomy thinks his matchup is trash, but I disagree because Volcanion. Volcanion is a very good Pokemon. Maybe the best thing in Tier 2. That's very debatable, but I think it's got to be up there. And its dual stabs hit so much on your team and threaten so much on your team that if it can mitigate its mediocre speed and do something effectively with its stabs, it's going to be really tough for you to deal with. But his best offensive options, Zero or Naganadel and Volcanion, are all weak to ground. So I think your Mamoswine, you don't see Max Mamoswine a lot, but I wouldn't be shocked to see Max Mamoswine this week. If you can make it fast or maybe even a slow version in Trick Room, somehow you get the speed advantage with it. If you start hitting first with this Mamoswine, it's going to do so much. I even considered putting Tornadus T as Goomy side because it doesn't get hit very hard by the ground side of Mamoswine. Then I remembered it's a flying type, and Mamoswine is also an ice type. So I just think your Mamoswine looks great, and I think his Volcanion looks great, and I think it's just going to be two big Chungus Pokemon throwing haymakers at one another.
I did max Mamoswine week 1.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's not usually.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm a big believer in Mamoswine. I'm not going to reveal too much because we do play pretty much the day this goes out. So I don't know if our match will be played before or after this, but it's going to be a good one. Yeah, he says his match is super, super bad, but I don't know about that one. Moving on, I'll go ahead and take this one. We got Jess and Dina. I picked the two fairy types. Well, I mean, Dina has more than one, and so does Jess, but the two, I guess, with the most variations. For Dina, the Tapu Koko hits a lot of what Jess kind of wants to do. I know you picked the Garchomp, and Koko Garchomp kind of go hand in hand. They can hit each other for super effective. But it really depends what set this Koko wants to use. Because if it's a physical set, it's going to be missing on some of the super effective hits. And then if it's a special set, it's going to be doing the same thing. Dina has to kind of pick her poison if she wants to use the Tapu Koko, but I do think it puts in incredible work against some of Jessica's options. And then alternatively, I picked the Mimikyu. This thing facilitates so much of what Jessica wants to do. Whether it's Trick Room, Psych Up, just being super supportive, passing around Will-O-Wisps. This thing is an absolute monster for the way Jess built her team. And if Dina kind of guesses wrong what kind of set this Mimikyu is, I do believe that Jessica can kind of just go in with her other pieces. So I do believe this is a guessing game on both sides. And let's just see who has the better reads. What do you think on this one?
Yeah, I think Garchomp, and specifically Safety Goggles Garchomp, is going to be huge for Jess because Dina's only ground switch-in is still that Butterfree. So I think an offensive Garchomp has the potential to do a lot of damage into this team if you can protect it decently well. And for Dina's side, I think if Jess doesn't run Safety Goggles, obviously this Butterfree is huge with Rage Powder. But even if Safety Goggles does come, it's a switch-in potentially. And I think that knowing Safety Goggles is there, you have the potential to shut down a lot of her other modes with Fast Sleep. Like, putting Mimikyu to sleep is one of the only ways to stop it from putting up Trick Room. And if Goggles is on Garchomp, that means it's not on Mimikyu. So I think Butterfree has the potential to stop a lot of what Jess wants to do, but it needs to focus on shutting down this Garchomp. Otherwise, Garchomp's going to run roughshod this week.
Yeah, this is my match of the week for me. I do think this is going to be a really good one. Again, down to some crucial reads and some really good team building. Why don't you take the next one here? We got Toxic and Dark.
Yeah, so looking at Toxic and Dark, they both played very well. I might even say surprisingly well week one. I think they both overperformed in terms of play, even though Toxic won and Dark didn't win his match. They both made a lot of really good plays throughout their matches at a very high level. Looking at the matchup, Toxic has a lot of special attackers on his team. Like, it's very special heavy except for the Arctozolt, Zapdos, and Escav, and I guess Diggersby. Something like this Goodra can just be a special wall and just sit in front of a lot of the things that Toxic wants to do. And that's why I picked it from Dark Side. I think this Goodra could be doing a lot and could be really good for him. And on the other side, I think that Arctozolt being the best way to hit Dark is going to... Arctozolt just hits everything on his team super. Like, I don't think he's got a Pokemon that doesn't get OHKO'd by it, except for Pincurchin.
I mean, it surprised Ryan
stabs.
with the damage output, so I wouldn't be surprised if it can do the same thing here.
So that's why I've selected it. But why don't you tell me about Diggersby and Urshifu?
Yeah, so it's funny you said the whole physical thing, because that's kind of right where I went. Diggersby has the elemental punches, so it can kind of create some offense for itself where its stabs kind of leave it lacking. You know, you look at it and you're like, oh, but he has a Corviknight and other things like that, like the Milo. But just Tech a Thunder Punch, and then those things kind of get hit really hard. Diggersby's no slouch for offense, and I just think it could be utilized relatively well in this matchup. And then for Dark, I did pick the Urshifu. I know Toxic has ways to hit it, like the Zapdos. In particular, I think that's kind of the only one, and that's really it. Other than that, you know, Urshifu kind of just goes in. You know, you got your Psy spam. Well, Urshifu's a Dark type. Zapdos is really a problem, but knowing Dark and how he builds, he's going to have an answer for it. That's just something you can't overlook. And then going down the list, it just hits everything else, I guess, other than the Crobat. But I do think Urshifu has just monstrous offensive potential here. So yeah, this is going to be a good game. Moving on, it's going to be me. So this is going to be Dan versus Noah. As I was looking at this match, this is the one I actually took a little bit longer than normal on. First of all, Zamazenta just looks absolutely absurd. It gets things like Wild Charge and ways to hit the other mons like Marowak and even Alcremie. And then Alcremie's really the only answer to a lot of these things. When it comes to like steel damage, the only real things Dan has, well, in terms of stab, is only the Steelix. But then Zamazenta does get like Iron Head and things, and that is a huge attack stat. And Alcremie doesn't have the best physical defense, but offensively it does hit a lot of Dan's things and can do some interesting things. I know its move pool isn't the deepest, but it does get some decent coverage moves. This is just kind of an awkward matchup for Noah. If he plays like he played against me, it's going to be a good match, but it is still just so awkward with that massive Zamazenta staring you down. Dan, what do you think about your own match?
I mean, if I bring Zamazenta, I think it looks pretty good into a lot of things. You know, base 115 defense that automatically gets a +1 into a team that leans physical feels decent a lot of the time. And it's faster than you think it is, and it's not a slouch in attack either. So I would agree that Zamazenta looks decent, but, you know, I might not even bring it because this Alchemy looks insane.
Oh, Dan,
into a lot
shut
of
the
things.
hell up.
Okay, Zamazenta's probably on the 6. You're right. But this Alchemy does look really decent. And I do have to make sure I play around it because Alchemy does have one-shot potential onto Zamazenta if I don't build correctly, and I don't have a lot of ways to threaten it with stab. But I think those are the main takeaways from this match. Is I need to play around Alchemy and he does need to play around Zamazenta. So I'd agree with what you have. Although there's also a world where he doesn't bring it Alchemy because there are some things on my team that he may or may not see that would necessitate him not bringing it.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, I mean, shit, I have a Melmetal and he still brought it.
Yeah.
Moving on here, you got Tay and Burst.
So Tay and Burst, there we go. So Tay and Burst is going to try to set up Blastoise because it's the new toy and he wants to play with it. I also think his Trick Room mode looks better into Tay than his fast modes, although he might go Rain and then have Trick Room in the back. I do think Trick Room to some extent comes. And because of that, I think Magmar is his most important thing. The redirection and protection is going to be huge for Glastrier because of what I picked on Tay's team, which is the Jirachi. The Jirachi shuts down so much of Burst's team, especially the Trick Room mode if that Magmar isn't able to redirect it, because a Max Jirachi is going to be hard for even a Glastrier to kill. And it's going to have one-shot potential on the Aromatisse, and Steel Spikes into a Glastrier, meaning Glastrier is going to have an even harder time killing it. And it's probably a two-shot into Max Glastrier with proper support. So that's why I picked the things that I picked, because I think that Jirachi is the best option to stop Trick Room, and I think Magmar is the best way to facilitate it. But I see you went on the opposite end of the spectrum when looking at this matchup.
Yeah, so the weather mode does honestly look decently well, mostly with all of Kingdra's tools. It can hit Dragonite, Volcarona. It's gonna struggle against the Jirachi, but oh well. And the Finny, but you do have answers on burst side, or on burst side for those. So I mean, as many hiccups as the rain mode might have in this, giving the speed control to burst and just letting Kingdra kind of do just Kingdra things, I do think is a good option. And then for Tay, as weird as it sounds, I picked Tangrowth, and I know that there's a Glastrier on the other side, but just being able to redirect at least maybe one of those hits. You redirect one of those hits, and Volcarona maybe gets off a big hit, or Dragonite gets off a big hit, or Jirachi gets off a big hit. And if Trick Room's not up already, Glastrier then again has to take another big hit. So I do just think the Rage Powder, mostly from the Tangrowth, not so much the Volcarona this week, is going to be actually huge in letting Tay kind of just work around some of the massive defensive stats that mostly the Glastrier has. But yeah, so it's honestly a weird matchup, not gonna lie. But moving on, I think this is our last one, and we got Charles and John. So for me on this one, I actually picked the Terrakion. We didn't see it last week, and I'm thinking this might be the week to pull the trigger on it. It does have a solid matchup into honestly everything. It gets ground coverage, of course, rock and fighting, and then it just kind of has to work around this Marshadow, and I do think Charles has some really good workarounds for that Marshadow. But Terrakion is just so offensively powerful in this matchup that I just don't think you can overlook it. And then for John, I did end up picking the Mr. Mime, since a lot of the ways to get Terrakion working can just be kind of foiled by a follow me. But not only that, the Mr. Mime is going to facilitate a lot of John's offense, and I think that's going to be super important on this one, since Charles does have things like Genesect, set up Blastoise, Terrakion. These things you're not going to want to take a single hit from. So if you can kind of redirect those and get off some bigger hits with some of your offensive monsters, I do think is going to be incredibly important. But this is another weird matchup for me, so why don't you tell me about Jolteon and Marshadow?
Marshadow looks really good this week. Like, it hits the Genesect decently well, it crushes Tapu Lele, it hits the Terrakion, it hits the Celebi, hits the Weavile, it hits the Drifblim. Don't know if it hits the Nidoqueen that hard, but I mean, it can probably one-shot it. It can one-shot the Jolteon because it's not bulky. Turtonator probably survives. And Togepi is going to be Focus Sash, so that survives the hit. But otherwise, this thing just hits so hard into so much of this team. It just looks awesome. On Charles' side, Jolteon's got a lot of really cool support options. This isn't necessarily for an offensive Jolteon, but I do think this matchup doesn't look great for him. But I do think there are some tools that this Jolteon could have that could help to even the matchup up a bit. I'm not sure exactly which ones, but Jolteon has enough weird random toolkitty things that I think it could throw John off enough to let his more offensive options come in. And maybe it's just as simple as you're going to paralyze this Marshadow. But there's a Jolteon set that makes this match very much in Charles's favor, and I hope that he finds it, because I don't see exactly what it is, but I have a feeling that it exists. So that's my selections for this week.
Yeah. Also, the signature move of Marshadow, if built correctly, will just take the beat up a boost from Terrakion, and that'd be hilarious.
Yes, one game, please.
Please. But yes, I've already said my match of the week. What is yours?
I'm going to have to go with Hector and Anthony this week. Two people that performed very well this past week. They've got some interesting teams that I'm interested to see how they line up into each other, because they both showed a strategy last week that's not going to have the same shock value this week. So I'm interested to see how they both continue to innovate. So that's my matchup of the week.
The two Cali boys. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for us. This is a little bit longer. Once we start getting into bye weeks, we'll kind of get into our normally length videos. But yeah, so that's going to do it for me. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. So peace.